All right, guys, welcome into my official March Madness Friday betting preview where I give out my best bets on Friday. We take a look at the overall analytics. What are the predictions? What are my predictions? I talked about the Thursday games yesterday, but I do quickly want to touch on a very important tweet. I'm going to read this out, and you guys can take it for what it is, but in the 64-team era, there have been 36 teams to enter the tournament as a 1 or a 2 seed that weren't ranked in the preseason AP poll. So these are teams that were not ranked in the preseason that finish as a 1 or a 2 seed. They have combined for 0 Final Fours, averaging fewer than 2 wins per tournament. Good luck to Purdue and Marquette. So guys, I would strongly recommend, based on these numbers, picking against both Purdue and Marquette in terms of how deep they're going to go, especially Purdue as a 1 seed. I think they could be out in the second round due to their rough draw facing an 8 or 9. And then Marquette, that is not great news for Marquette, who I have in the national championship, but I did want to pass that note along if anyone wants to make any bracket adjustments. I think that Marquette region, we might be talking about a possible 6 or lower seed making the Final Four out of that region, but that is just something I wanted to say there. Let's take a look at the overall analytical preview predictions for Friday. So these will be the first round games, but kind of the second day. You've got Gonzaga sitting right now 17-point favorites over Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon, a really weak 14 seed. UConn, about 11-point favorites over Iona. We know UConn is a very strong 4 seed. St. Mary's sitting -5 over VCU in that 5v12 matchup. A lot of people picking Virginia Commonwealth to win that game. Creighton sitting -6 versus NC State. I really like Creighton. And I know it's risky because you don't know what you're going to get from Creighton, but I like Creighton to cover that spread. Right now it's 5.5. Next, we've got Xavier -13 versus Kennesaw State. I'm concerned about Xavier. I am. The 8v9 game is Memphis FAU. Memphis sitting -1. That should be a really good game. That matchup should not be taking place. Both of those teams should have been seeded higher. Marquette only -7 analytically against Vermont. Vermont is a very hard 15 seed. That's at least what the analytics say. The analytics actually like Vermont over every 14 seed. I saw that yesterday. There was a model that liked Vermont over all the 14 seeds. Next, you have Baylor -9 against UCSB. Kentucky -3. They're 3-point favorites over Providence. You have Kansas State sitting -8 over Montana State. Indiana -4 versus Kent State. I love Kent State in that upset. You've got basically a pick'em in the 7v10 game. I know a lot of people picking USC. A lot of analytical models like USC to upset Michigan State, but it's really not an upset. That's basically a pick'em. And then the 5v12 matchup, Miami and Drake, it's another pick'em. That is a crazy situation there. That is a 5v12 game, but you have it as a 1-point spread overall. All right, let's get to the actual game lines and dissect this. USC and Michigan State kicking it off at 12:15. The over-under sitting at 137.5. I would lean towards the under, and I would actually lean towards Izzo and MSU getting a win -2. USC, they had a nice season, but we do have to remember the Pac-12 is a very weak conference. You can run up wins there. I'll take MSU, the 7 seed, to win that game. Next, we have Kennesaw State taking on Xavier. I like Kennesaw to keep this game relatively close. I think the tip time being at 12:40 is a big positive for Kennesaw. So I like them, to probably not upset Xavier, but it's going to be a closer than expected game. I would take them plus the 11.5. Next, we have Baylor -10.5 versus Santa Barbara. I would stay away from that. You don't know what you're going to get from Baylor. I would expect them to win for sure, but 10.5 is not a number I'm attracted to. St. Mary's sitting -4 versus VCU. So this is one of those 5v12 matchups. I do like St. Mary's to win this game, but they are coming off their worst game of the year, getting crushed by Gonzaga in their conference championship. Marquette -10.5 versus Vermont. So if you believe in the analytics, there is significant value on Vermont, who's listed as basically a 7-point underdogs analytically. This is a great tip time in terms of an upset. Marquette playing at 2:45, right smack dab in the middle of the afternoon. I'm a little wary right now of Marquette, but I do trust them based on the way they finished the season winning the Big East. Next, you have Pittsburgh, who did win their first 4 game last night. They're taking on Iowa State. So I love the under in this game. These two teams, not good offensively. I don't think they combine for 131. To me, there's a little bit of value on Iowa State because they're only -4. Pittsburgh was kind of thought of as a weak tournament team, even though they were in the first 4. Next, you have Creighton and NC State. So I do like Creighton here, -5.5 to cover in that game. NC State, kind of another kind of weak. We didn't even know if NC State was going to make the tournament. Well, I guess they were kind of in. Yeah, they were kind of in, but they're an 11 seed. They're rather weak. And Creighton, yes, they're inconsistent, but the analytics love them as like a top 12 team. Iona and UConn sitting -9. I would stay away from that. Rick Pitino on Iona. I mean, I like UConn. I have them in my Final Four, but for this game, -9, I'd probably stay away from it. If anything, I would say UConn -9 to cover. Next, you've got Providence and Kentucky. Kentucky -4. I really like Kentucky to have a bounce-back tournament after getting knocked out in the first-round upset to St. Peter's last year. So I would probably lean towards Kentucky -4. Drake and Miami, I'm taking Drake on the money line. I really do believe in that upset. Miami, really explosive offensive team, horrible on defense. That's going to be a problem. So that could be, I am a little bit worried that that's a game where we're all picking the upset and it doesn't end up happening. It seems like 1 or 2 of those every year now in March, with the rise of social media and everything like that. Everyone's in on an upset. It feels like more people than not are picking Drake to beat Miami. And it could be that one game that we're all expecting an upset and it ends up not being. But I do like Drake there, and I think Drake could potentially go to the Sweet 16, and I think they would face Houston if they went to the Sweet 16. Next, you've got Grand Canyon and Gonzaga. So Gonzaga's offense is just super elite. You can take a look at the over-under at 156. It's a high number. I think Gonzaga wins this game probably by more than 15.5. FAU and Memphis, I like Memphis, although they are 2-point favorites, and FAU, they only have 3 losses on the season. That is a heavyweight 9:20 matchup on Friday night. Montana State and Kansas State, I'll say I like the value on Kansas State, -8. I know they're a really weak 3 seed, but I'm really not feeling Montana State at all in this one. I love the over in this game. It's a 9:40 start. That is a great window for Kansas State to really lay it on a bad team. I mean, I guess Montana State's not a bad team. They're inside the top 120, but to me, it's just good value. Kansas State has really good guard play. They can be explosive. I know people are not high on them. I don't even have them making the Sweet 16, but I think this is a really good spot for KSU to run up the score and possibly drop an 100-burger on Montana State. And then I do have Kent State moneyline versus Indiana. That is kind of my other big upset. That's the 4v13 game. Traditionally, when it comes to March Madness, there's always going to be one 4v13 upset, maybe 2. Of course, Virginia, the Virginia-Furman game, that's another one that could happen. But I do like Kent State. They've got one of the best defenses in college basketball, and they've got a young guard playing really well that I could see lighting up the 3-point line against Indiana and leading them to a victory. Indiana, they're entering the tournament. We know they've got Trace Jackson Davis. He's kind of their pillar, but he is a center. So I would say that kind of limits their ceiling overall. And Kent State, if I'm Indiana, that's just a rough draw. If you're a 4 seed, facing Furman is a lot better. Really, any of the other 13 seeds. Kent State is really good. I was really high on Toledo, and Toledo lost to Kent State by like 18 points in the MAC championship game. And then just for fun, kind of going over some of the NIT matchups that are happening tonight. This is an interesting one. You've got Youngstown State hosting Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's the 1 seed, but they're traveling to Youngstown State. Oklahoma State right now sitting -6. You have Clemson, big favorites over Morehead State. They're -15. You've got Oregon over UC Irvine there by 7. That could be a higher scoring game. One of the first 4 games happening tonight, Nevada and Arizona State. They've got Nevada listed -3, so maybe there's some value on Nevada in that one. I know the actual odds makers have Arizona State, or at least the last time I checked, they had Arizona State favored by like 2.5. Florida and UCF, the Battle of Florida, basically a toss-up pick'em. You've got Cincinnati sitting -7 versus Virginia Tech. You have North Texas and their slow pace. They are -16 against an Alcorn State team who's only projected to score 54 points. New Mexico and Utah Valley, that should be a fun game. You've got New Mexico sitting about -3.5 right there. Santa Clara and Sam Houston. Santa Clara on the road going to Sam Houston. They're -3, but I do like Sam Houston to win that game outright. And then the 16v16 other first 4 matchup we are looking at, it is Fairleigh Dickinson and Texas Southern. That is a virtual pick'em toss-up. Fairleigh Dickinson is known as the worst team in the field of 68. Texas Southern is very likely the second worst team in the field overall. So those are kind of the NIT and the first 4 matchups tonight. I would say maybe a little bit of value on Nevada, although they're playing really bad. They kind of backed their way into the tournament, if you guys didn't know. And then Texas Southern versus Fairleigh Dickinson. I think Texas Southern wins that game because Fairleigh Dickinson has such a horrible defense. But let's be honest, folks. Texas Southern, they're 14-20. I mean, come on. And then we're just going to roll through this. So these are the official best bets on Friday. You've got Kennesaw State plus the 11.5 versus Xavier. I think they keep it close. I believe that Xavier will win this game, but I am starting to feel something, whether it's this Xavier-Kennesaw State game or it's that Santa Barbara Baylor game. Feeling a little weird about one of these games. Don't know if an upset's going to happen, but I think they're close. Michigan State -2 versus USC. So I'm really not buying USC. And Michigan State, they're trending maybe a little bit down. But that if you take a look at that Big Ten tournament game versus Ohio State, the Buckeyes shot 10 of 19 from 3. Michigan State was 3 of 16. Kind of an aberration. I wouldn't take too much into it. You know, Michigan State has a really good senior forward. They've got a good point guard. It's Izzo and March. I think they get a win against a USC team coming from the Pac-12. I'll take them to cover the 2. Pittsburgh versus Iowa State. I like the under. It is a pretty low number, 130.5. But this is a game, I mean, you're talking about if both of these teams are in the 50s, or even if we get a game, I believe if it's like 67-60, the under still hits. And are we really expecting Iowa State with their snail pace to get into the 70s? I don't see it. I think they want to play a closer, low-scoring game, and I think Pittsburgh will oblige to that because they're just not very good. Creighton minus the 5.5 versus NC State. This is a game where I think if Creighton gets up by like 7 or 8 early, Creighton will play very loose, and when they play loose, they can win big and they can score a lot, and you're talking like an 87-67 type win for Creighton. That's what I see. NC State is a week 11 seed. It's actually a little bit of a fun fact here. Because we had no bid stealers this year when it comes to the Power 5 conferences, there were no bid stealers, and same thing with any of the Group of 5 or, you know, the mid-majors, whatever. There's no bid stealers, so it actually weakened the bubble because it didn't bump any of those teams down onto the bubble that would have gotten in because there's no bid stealers. So the bubble was really weak this year, and a team like NC State, they get in, you know, not even playing in the first 4. They are a weak team. I think Creighton wins that game by double digits. Drake, the money line versus Miami. That's my 12-5 upset. We'll see if it's right or wrong. You're playing Russian roulette, but Drake played really well, and I think they are the only double-digit seed that I could see making a legit super run to the Elite Eight. I know they're in Houston's region, but Houston dealing with injury. Listen, I'm saying this as someone that has Houston winning the national title. You can see a scenario where Houston dealing with injury, playing at a slower pace, Drake gets a fluky win, and they go on a major run. So Drake, to me, is by far the best 12 seed in the tournament, and this is a tournament with a lot of good 12 seeds. I will take them on the money line versus Miami. Kansas State -8 versus Montana State. Also, the over 139. I love it. I just think there's value on Kansas State. This is a 3v14 matchup. They're -8. I mean, they could very easily win this game by double digits. And then I'm going in on Kent State on the money line versus Indiana. That's a 4v13 game where Kent State is only 4-point underdogs. So that is kind of my other upset I'm going with for Friday. But guys, those are my best bets for the Friday slate of games. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.